Okay, welcome to this course on Photoshop. I haven't done really a kind of basic course going through most of the tools and things, so that's what this is about. So it should help the beginner, intermediate and maybe the advanced. But let's open Photoshop, which is now open. You'll be presented with a screen like this. Now I do have lots of other options on my other monitor. And so it's a good idea to have a dual monitor, then you can shove these out the way and be able to get to them easily. The other thing I have got, I'm using a mouse at the moment, but I have got a graphics tablet, which is great to use with Photoshop because you get the pressure sensitivity in your brushes. Also another good thing to note is that you can dock these panels together. You just drag them, pull them out, just drag them or dock them together like this, which makes it easy for you to get to. As you can see in the layers palette, all the drops are out there. If you want to get rid of one, so I wanted to get rid of the history, I could come down here and just hit history and it'll disappear, and of course I can bring it back up again. So the Windows area is basically for your workspace. You've got default settings for certain things here, and other options down here to turn palettes on and off, and some of them you might click, say for instance you might click the channel and you might not see anything pop up, but it's actually popped up over here because I've got it docked. So that's sort of docking the palettes together. I leave the history out because you can go back through that. I leave the brushes out because I switch, but I'm just going to put this over here. If I do anything I'll bring it back into view, but just as not to confuse things I'm going to put lots of these palettes kind of out the way. Right, so that's the panel sections done over there. Right, okay, down here on the left hand side we've got all the tools that we kind of use every day. We've got the move tool here where it allows you to move elements, and I'll show you more about these as we continue. Right, let's say we want to create a document and we want a certain size. We go to File, go to New, and inside here we get our new panel comes up. Now if you're doing this for print, you probably want the resolution a minimum of 300 because that's a high res print, but the only problem with that is that it's slower depending on the size that you put in there, because the file will be much bigger. So for this I'm going to use 72, and 72 is actually the monitor's resolution. So it's not a print resolution, it's a monitor's resolution. You can choose, if you're not used to working in pixels, you can choose any of the other measurement formats there. So you can pick those and say exactly what you want. But in this case I'm going to pick 2000 width, which is quite big, by about 1000 height. 72. Colour mode I'm going to leave RGB. You can switch these colour modes around. Of course if it's going out for print you'll want it as CMYK. Now don't worry about this, don't think, oh, you know, he's throwing these things at me, 300 CMYK, blah blah blah. Don't worry about it. Just remember that if you're doing something for print you should have it on 300, or you should talk to your printer and say to the printer, what resolution do you want me to do this document at, and they might say 600, so then you put 600 in there or 300, and they'll give you a size and you can put the size in there and then just click OK, and that's my document open. Actually it's a bit big, so I'm going to a bit big width wise. I want you to be able to view this, so I'm going to put this at maybe 1500 and click OK. Oh, wrong one. Yeah, because the height's changed as well. So it's constraining the proportions. If I change the width, the height will pro down with it. So I'm going to just turn off constrain proportions and turn that height back up to 1000, which of course will change the width and height of the document. Doesn't matter. Okay, so there it is. Right, let's have a look at what we can do. Right, down here we've got our master layers, This is layers. Come up to window and then hit the layers. If it's not visible, press F7. You notice on these commands that are used all the time, there's shortcut keys to allow you to just pop them up. Over here we've got our layers palette. I'll just bring it over here for now, and you'll see that there's white in this layer. It's because it's the background. Now it means that it's always at the back because it's at the background. So what I tend to do is I tend to double click on it and make it a layer, because then I can switch it around. Now it's hard to sort of explain that, but if I create a new layer, so there's a little tab here, and create a new layer, or Shift Control N, and it will ask me what the name of it you want it named. I could click OK and it would be layer 1, but I'm going to call it element 1, and then I'm just going to click OK, and you'll see that it's appeared here. Now if I click, this is the layer that is selected, so hence if I draw something now, it will be on elements 1. If I had this layer selected, it would be on the background layer. So I click elements 1, and all I'm going to do is just use my paintbrush here, and don't worry about the colours, I'll tell you about that in a second, and just draw this. Ugh. And now if I turn this off, it will disappear. But what if I wanted it behind the background for some reason? If I drag it down, it won't let me, and this is because this is the background layer and it's locked. So to be able to drag this down under this base layer, I always double click this and just type BKG and click OK. Now it unchecks it as a locked layer. You can lock it again by clicking there, but now it allows me to drop this underneath this layer. So I'm selecting it and I'm dragging it. You see, select and drag. So that tells you about that. So as you see, you can build up layers. I can do another layer, and I can come down here. This is the color picker, or you've got swatches up here. I'm going to double click this, and then I'm just going to select a red and click OK. Now I've got the brush, I'm on this layer here, and I'm going to do this over the top. Okay, so now it's on this layer. Now of course I can drag this underneath this, I can drag this underneath this, or I can shift select both of them and drag them under the background, and I can drag them back up. So that's layers. It allows you to order things and keep things in a bit more control. Right, okay, so what about elements within here? If we want to actually import some elements, lots of ways of doing it. You can copy and paste stuff from other documents or from websites. But for now, what I'll do is I want to clear this area. So here I've got the erase tool, and I could go over this and erase it. And you'll see that it's erasing it slowly. And that's due to the opacity up here. And this is pretty common to most things like brushes. You'll see there'll be an opacity and the eraser. So it's erasing it 23%. So if I drag this slider to 100% and now I erase, it will erase all of it. But there's also quicker ways to erase areas. One is you can select the whole document and just hit delete. And to be able to do that, you hit select and all, and there'll be a little like dotted worms running around the outside. If I now hit the delete or the backspace, it will delete them out. That's one way of doing it. The other way is to come up here, and this is the selection tools, and there's lots of common selection tools like rectangles and elliptical marquees, single rows, single columns. But I'll just stick with the rectangle tool, and now I can hold my mouse button, this is my left mouse button, and drag, and now I can just put it around that, and now I can hit, and I've done this on purpose, backspace, and you'll see the red won't disappear. It's because I'm on the wrong layer. I need to come up to this layer and hit delete. I'll just undo that. Right, and to undo, here's our history. We can do this. We can just run back through the history or forwards through the history. I can go right up to here and get them all back. So you can run up and down the history, and it will record a certain amount of levels. They sort of keep pushing up, so be careful you don't go too far and try and get back. And that's why it's important to save the document as you work through it. So save it as document 1, document 2, document 3, etc. Obviously replacing document with the name of the file. Alright, so that's one way of selecting. If I want to deselect, I can press Ctrl D, or I can go select, deselect. And another way of creating these selections is to use this selection tool here. There's different types. This is the polygon selection tool, which allows me to click, drag, click, and I'm clicking and dragging around, and when I get near the end I can double click, and that allows me to select, and of course I could delete the red in there. Or you can use the lasso tool here. I'm going to deselect again, Ctrl D, and now I can just hold the mouse button down and just freehand drag around and release, and that will select. And there's magnetic, which actually clings to areas, so I'll just deselect again, and it will cling to this red. Now this will be handy later when we start to clip areas out. It's trying to drag to the colour differences. If I release now, or click there, it's just selected around there. But I'll go back to my polygon tool. I'll just select around here and delete. And of course, to delete a layer, you can select the layer, come down here to the bin and just delete, and it disappears. So right, now let's get on to, now we've looked at these kind of tools. Actually, we didn't look at the move tool, so let me just do another Here's the move tool, allows you to move around, simple as that. So we've covered this move tool, this standard selection tool, and these selection tools here. And these are quite important. We've also covered the brush there, so you know how to get to the brush and the eraser. The other thing that we need to look at is the magnify. So if I click the magnify, you can see there's a little plus. If I now click it, I can zoom into the document. If I hit the Alt key, it will turn to a minus. So I'm holding the Alt key. Now I can drag back out, or I can hold the mouse key. So I'm holding the mouse key and I'm just dragging it. So if I'm really close in, what about if I want to move around the document? Well, I don't want to use the move tool because that will move the element. So I can use the hand tool here, and this will allow me to move around. It will move the whole document as opposed to each element. A shortcut key for that, the shortcut keys you should be using for these all the time because you don't want to keep coming down here. So to use the move tool, I'll just go up here to the brush tool, so I'm off that tool. If I want to get to this hand tool with a shortcut, I press the space bar. Yeah? If I want to zoom in, I press Ctrl plus. Hold on. Something funny's going on. Ctrl plus or Ctrl minus. So I hold the Control key, I hit the minus, or I hit the plus. If you press 0, it will just frame it. So I can zoom in, press Ctrl 0, and it will frame it in. So this is a way that you zoom in and out of the document really quickly without. So it's Control the plus or Control the minus to zoom out, Control plus to zoom in. To frame the document, Control 0. And I think on a Mac that's the Option key, isn't it, or the Apple key? Apple key, I think. Yeah, so on the Mac it's there, but it's play around with those. Normally to control the Alt key and the Apple key there do those things. So anyway, that's that. So that's a speedy way. So we won't be going back to these. When I'll be zooming in and out, I'll be pressing Control plus or Control minus or Control 0 to zoom in and out of the document. So we don't need to come back to those. Right, so we'll be tackling a few of these other tools as we go along. maybe I should show you the text tool. No, I'll show you that later. So the first thing I want to do is just delete this element out of here. So select all. Right, from now on I'm going to press, when I want to go to this select all, I'm going to press Control A just to speed workflow, and to deselect I'm going to press Control D. So Control A, I'm going to backspace, delete it, and then Control D to deselect. Okay, so now we've got an empty layer here. So empty layer, I'm going to drag this back into my palette here. Drag this out a little bit more to make it a bit clearer. And now I'm going to bring in an element. So I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Open, and I'm going to go into my libraries, and let's just go into my architectural area, yeah, and drag this picture. Right, so you'll see it's opened it as a new document up here. You can jump. So I'm going to press Control A to select all. I'm going to press Control C. This is to copy it. This is up here. Control C to copy. Then I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to press Control V, and you'll see that it's dropped it into this layer. So this is my element, and the size of it is because of the size of the document, so you dropped it in there. So I'd be a little bit careful about transforming it and making it too big, because it will pixelate. What I did there to transform this selection is I went to Edit, I'm on the correct layer, I went to Edit and then Free Transform, and it allows me to do this, this, this. If I want to constrain it to the same proportions as the actual picture was, I hold the Shift key and it constrains it. So I keep it about that size. Then to actually apply it, you double click. So as you can see, I've got the move tool up here, so I'm able to move this element. So would it be good to have this duplicated a few times? So if I go to, let's just do a bit of retouching work first. So I'll put it here. I'm going to zoom in, and I want to get rid of this 180. So what you can use is what's called the clone tool, which is here. So I hit the clone tool, it will give you the size. Now if you haven't got the size of the brush, it's probably because you've got the cap locks turned on. Turn that off, and you've got a bracket key on your keyboard that allows you to shortcut to be able to select the brush size. I want quite small because I want to sample and get rid of that 180. So the brush, I can choose brushes over here. This is basic brush, and I can also set the size in here as well, as you can see. But I would use the bracket key on your keyboard. I think that's next to the P, so it's the P is the next button and the next button. Play around with those two, you'll better shortcut increase the size. So I have it quite small, so I've got the clone brush. What I need to do now is press the Alt key, and this will put a little crosshair, and it will basically say where I click with my left mouse button is where I will sample. So I'll just show you. So I'm going to crosshair this, crosshair, so I'm pressing Alt, I'm going to click once, now I'm going to come back up here, and you'll see it's going white, and that's because it's cloned this area here. So what I can do now is just move this, and you'll see a little cursor underneath that shows you where it's sampling from. Just to make it a bit clearer, if I cloned here, click, I brought it down here, you'll see it's mirroring this, so I could put another one of these just here on the wall. I'm not going to, so I'm going to press Control Z, or you can click here. Control Z goes back one. So now I've got rid of that. Say I wanted to duplicate this door across a few times. I'm going to use the move tool. I'm going to move it about here, and I'm going to come over to my layers and I'm going to duplicate the layer, and you'll see it's produced a copy. If I move this now, you can see that it's duplicated. The problem I've got is my lighting's a little bit different one side to the other, but we can take care of that. So to get this lighting about the same as the other side, I'm going to use the selection tool, and centrally straight through this I'm going to drag down. Now that means that anything I do will only be applied to where the selection is. So I'll give you an example. If I got the brush and I clicked here and dragged, nothing would happen, but if I come over here, it'll apply it across there. So I'm pressing Control Z. So that's how that works. Remember, I've got it on the correct layer. It's this layer, so this is the one it's going to be applied to. I'm going to come up to Image and Adjustments and Levels. It will bring up this little box. What I'm trying to do is get this colour to be the same as this, so I might need to just drag that mid-tone a little bit that way, but I don't want to go too much. Click OK and press Control D to deselect. Now we've got a line through there, so that didn't work. So how else can I do it? So press D, yeah. So I'm going back through my layers. So how else could I do that? Well, I could take a sample of this colour and place it in there. But the best way of doing it, I think, will be to actually reselect this area and kind of paint it in. So we're going to do some selection work now. So I'm going to press Control D, and I'm going to merge this layer down onto this layer. So I'm going to select this top layer. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to merge down. That's Control E. Now this is in one layer. Now I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to move my brush to the side and zoom in. I'm going to move my history to the side as well. And I'm going to choose this selection tool, which is a polygon one. And I'm going to zoom in even further. And I'm going to start to draw out . Whoops, click. And I'm basically coming up and just going around. I'm not going to be too careful with this. Come over here. Now I can budge the canvas up, so you can notice I'm sort of budging there. I go here, just outside, and down here. You can spend as much time on this as you want. Well, why am I coming right down here? It's because I want to actually get rid of this bush. So that's the selection done. Now the only problem is I've got these and I need to take these from the selection, because if I paint it's going to go over the top of this lamp. So what I can do is I can take away from the selection. So if I go into the selection, let me just zoom out. Some people find this quite hard to understand, but if you want to take something away from the selection, you click the Alt key and then I drag and then I'll come back out and it's taken it away. If I wanted to add to the selection, I would click the Shift key and that would add to the selection. So I want to take away from the selection, or rather cut out this little lamp. I'm not worrying, yeah, I'll cut them both out because the shadows are slightly different there. Actually, I'll just cut one and I'll just duplicate it across. So I've pressed, I'm now holding the Alt key as I'm working, and I'm just going to roughly come around it because I want this kind of shadow at the back, and we're trying to match that colour, so there we go, and link up. Now when I paint, it's not going to go across that lamp. So now I need to just take this colour and paint it in the other side. So I've got my brush. Now what I do is you can sample, there's a picker here. You can click this, and if you look at this swatch here, when I click it will match the colour. So that's that colour, it's that colour. But there's a quicker way of doing it. If I'm already on the brush, I can press the Alt key and that will also quickly select. So now I've selected my colour, I'm going to press the bracket key, make this quite big, and I want to make sure that my opacity is probably about 67, and then I'm going to press Control minus to come out a little bit so I can see the big picture, and I'm going to start to kind of flow these colours in. I might press the Alt again just to sample another little bit of colour. And there you go, we got the idea. And press Control D to deselect. So you can see I've cut that out now. But what about this lamp? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the clone tool, I'm going to press the Alt key, I'm going to clone him, and I'm going to put him in position here. And there we go. He's a little bit higher, but you get the idea. So what about this ground? It's not exactly the same all the way across because of the perspective. So what I think I'll do, I don't want to get in too much into depth, I'm just going to delete that out for now and put something in there later. So that's how to sort of get two elements. Then of course I could duplicate this up, and we know that half of it's going to work, so I'm going to turn this layer off, and I'm going to press the selection tool there, but this time I'm going to change the feather. Now what does the feather do? Well, if I click and I drag and then I just delete, you can see it's a hard edge, but we don't want that. So if I change the feather, so I just deselect, I'll change the feather to maybe 30, and now I come across the door. And the reason I'm coming across the door is that you can see the feather better. So now I'm going to delete, and you can see it's feathered it, so whatever's underneath it will sort of be much softer. So let's go back, and what I want to do is just select it here, and now I'm going to delete. I'm going to bring this back, and I'm going to use the move tool, and I'm just going to move it across. And so as you can see, it's matched it in. The feather was a little bit too much, so I'm going to use the history brush, and I'm going to go back. I'm going to feather this by 10. And deselect. Now I'm going to bring this back up, use the move tool, move it across, so it's about the same distance, and there we go. So we don't have to bother drawing all that in, which is what we did last time. We've got a line going through here, and that's the leftover of this image. So I'll turn that other layer off and you can see it. So I just need to delete that out, so I'm going to put feather down, back down to 0. I'm just going to select here, just backspace it. Now we won't have that line. And of course I can merge this onto the other layer. I press Ctrl E for merging, or you can come down to here and merge down. So very quickly we've kind of put 3 doors exactly the same in a row. And of course, if I wanted to extend this top part, I can use the selection tool, across here, select a part of it, come up to edit and free transform, deselect, and there we go. Now the image, you can see there's white at the end, and I only want 3 doors. So how do I kind of crop this image down? I don't want to change the size of the image, because if I enlarge it, it's going to pixelate it. I never really went on about pixelating, but I'm going to just demo what pixelation is. I'm going to take this image and go to free transform, and then I'm going to bring this canvas right down. I'm going to drag this image now massively, like this. Now I'm going to press this, and we're going to zoom back in. Now this is what happens when you pixelate an image. It goes all grainy. Look, it's not as clear. And this is what happens if you take an image and you over enlarge it from its current size. You might get away with doing a little bit, but to do it too much, you'll get this blurring effect where you'll visibly be able to see all the little dots that make up the image. So say I wanted to crop this down, I can use this tool here, which is the crop tool. And this crop tool just allows me to drag out, and it'll kind of snap to the image where I want to crop it. So if I decided I wanted to crop it here, I could, or to the top of the image here. So this is perfect. I want a little bit of the foreground. No, I'm going to leave that out. So once you're ready and you decide this is where I want to crop, you just double click and suddenly it will crop it down. Remember, the image size will change. We had it to 2000 by 1500. Notice the size now. It doesn't change the resolution, but it changes the image size, so the document size. So bear that in mind. If I want to view this actually pixel size, I can go to view and I can go actual pixels, and that is pixel size 1:1, so the screen ratio, so it gives you exactly the size that you would see it on the screen. So by zooming in, that's not the actual size. You need to actually go to view and then pixel size. If you want to see the print size of it, you can go view and down to print size, which is the same as this, because at the moment it's at 72. If I had the resolution at 300, it would be much bigger. So that's about that. Okay, so yeah, I mean, covered a fair bit so far. So what about all this greenery and things like that? Well, let's just now go and have a look and see if we can put something in front of this. I've got an archive of images that I use. suspect I'm not going to have a bush. These are my texturing images. Flowers and foliage. No bushes in there. Sure, I've got some somewhere. Okay, no mind. What I'll do is I'll sample a little bit of what we've got. So I'm going to zoom into this little bush here, choose my clone tool. I'm just going to sample a bit of this, and I'm just going to start to just click little bits out and just sample it. I'm going to select a bit of that to cut this away, and there we go. And I'll do the same for this one. Click about the middle. And there we go. So put little bushes in there. If you want to take a bit of this. It's put a kind of soft edge around it, so what I can do, I could switch brushes to like the hard opacity one. This is a harder brush. It will give you a harder edge, but maybe that's a little bit too hard. But you get the idea. So there you go. So my bushes have been put in. Looks a bit better. But say I wanted to put sort of maybe graffiti on the top of this wall. I've got a file for graffiti. So somewhere. I could try something with this. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select some of this. So I'm going to come across here using the selection tool again. And I'm going to quickly sort of come around here. I'm going to drag back to about here and just sort of follow the design around. Now I'm going to press Ctrl C to copy, and then I'm going to press Ctrl V to paste it into here. Now I need to use my free selection tool because it's miles too big. I need to zoom out so I can see it. So I'm going to shift and hold this down like that, and I'm going to do it bigger at the moment because I want to show you another technique. So the perspective is completely wrong here, so to change this I can go to free transform and then distort, and I'm just going to shift and drag this up, and what I'm trying to do is get it so it's about kind of even. That's not bad. Like that. And now I'm going to use the eraser, but I'm going to use one of the raggedy brushes, say something like sponge brush, reduce the size down, and just start to kind of give it a kind of sprayed look. Just to break it up a bit. And I can change this opacity. Gives it a kind of damped in look. Okay, that'll do. Now I can go to free transform it down a bit further. Put it in there, and then I tend to just change the fill a little bit. It makes it look like it's kind of pasted on the wall. So there you go. And right, so that's on another layer. So I'd name these layers, so I'd just double click in there and then just type it graffiti. It's not very good, but it gives you an idea. Okay, so what if I wanted to put text in here? Well, down here we got the text tool. So if I click the text tool and then I click, it will create a new layer. And then I can type. So I'll type graffiti. Once I select it, I can change the colour of it. So over here in my swatches, I can also change the colour here, or I can click up here and I can change the colour in here. I'll make it a kind of greeny colour. That seems to be the theme. I can also select the typeface down here, and I can select the size of the character, the font, and it gives you other settings in there, whether it's bold, and you can set the sharpness, strongness, smoothness, so play around with those. So now I've got text, but I can also, if I wanted to, free transform this text. So I could scale this text, even though it's not supposed to be scaled. I could scale it. And I could double click and it will be applied. Right, okay, so this is the first part of the course. Next part of the course we'll be going through more of the tools, and we'll be adding effects, playing around with a few more of the functions in here. And we'll also show about cutting things out more accurately and using the magic wand, and also using filters within this area. So I hope you've enjoyed part one of the basics of Photoshop. Okay, welcome back. So we've looked at this move tool for moving elements from layers around. We've looked at setting the actual fill tint down and up, and we've also got opacity as well. Now there is a difference between these two, but we'll get into that later. I could just as easily take the opacity down and it would do the same job, but there is a difference between these two, which we'll explore later when we look at layer effects. But also with the graffiti, even though it's text, I can still reduce the opacity down on that. So that's great. Right, so we've looked at the move tool, the marquee tool for selecting areas out or filling areas, because like I said, if I do a use any of these two tools here, the selection tool or the marquees. Let's choose a circle for a change. Right, again, if you hold the shift key it will be a circle. If you release the shift key you can do it as an ellipse. And like I said, if I'm on a layer, that's where it will be applied. We got the fill brush here with the fill. There's another one which is the gradient, which we'll get into later. So if I wanted to fill it with a red, then I would click here, come into my reds, click OK, and then I just drop it in there. It's more of a pink. Let's bring it right into the red and fill. And of course I could hit the backspace to delete that out. So we've looked at those selections. You might notice sometimes it leaves a rim. If you do a double fill, it will kind of push it outside. But so we've looked at that and the selection tools. So you've got the lasso, the polygonal one, which you click points and then double click to end. We've got the magic brush tool here, which we'll get into later. We've looked at the crop, we've looked at the colour picker, so you can pick a colour to sample. Check out down here, I'll pull a colour in from the text, so it's applied it there, so you can get the same colour. Very handy tool. Or of course if you've got the brush selected, you can just press the Alt key on your keyboard and it will turn it into the colour picker. For speed you might be colour picking all the time, so handy shortcut to know. We looked at the clone tool because we did those little bushes down here. We haven't looked at this yet. We've looked at the eraser, we looked at the fill, haven't looked at the smudge or the dodge tools there, or the pen tool, but we've looked at the text tool there, the selection tools there, and magnifying glass and the hand. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit, but there's still loads to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a kind of real world project now. I'm just going to open up a picture that was taken of a microchip. For those of you that don't know, I do lots of website design and I incorporate lots of 3D elements into my designs. So what I would need to do is I take a photograph of a product and then I take a side view, top view, whatever views I need, front views, and then I cut it out and I put it into a I'll show you, it's easier. Yeah, I do this basically, so I cut them all out. So how do I cut them all out? I mean, I need these all cut out and sized at the correct sizes so that within my 3D application I can start to create this model. I'll show you a model I've done, if I've got one. No, I haven't rendered it out, so don't worry about that. So how did I get this kind of thing? Well, we'll do that next. I'll show you how I cut it all out. And okay, so let's open up this file. I'm going to close this now and we've kind of finished with it. I'm going to go File, I'm going to go Open. I'm going to find my products, which are in here. I'm going to open up one of these, and here he is. If I view him actual pixels, you'll actually see he's massive. So there you go. Control minus to zoom out a little bit. I want to get rid of all this background, surplus to requirement. So I use a rectangle tool. I'll double click my background. Remember, because it gives me a clear background then. I'll just basically select around it and then I will inverse this selection. Now I'll zoom out so you can see what's happening. If I now delete it, it would delete this inner part, but I want to reverse it. So if I go to select and inverse, which is Shift, Control and I, then it means that I can press the delete and it will get rid of the background. Now I'm going to create a white background, so I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to deselect, remember that's Control D or deselect in here. And I'm going to come down to the fill brush. I'm going to default these back to black and white, so just hit this little one here, it'll do that. Now I'm going to switch over, because if I fill at the moment the black will fill in here, but I want to fill it with white, so I switch the colour, and that's the front one now. So this is the switch button. So now I fill, and it's white. It's gone in over the top of my layer, so I drag this down. I come back to this layer, and now what I'm going to do is I've got a grid along the top of rulers. So I'm going to, in this ruler bar, I'm going to click and drag, and that will bring a ruler down as I want to straighten my model up. Now I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to go to Edit and Free Transform, and now I can make sure that this is straight. So if I click inside the image, I can move it around. Outside the image, I can twist and turn. So I'm just going to make sure that this is straight. I'm going to bring another line down just to check. Yep, that's all pretty straight. Slight bit of a twist there, but that's fine. And then I'll double click. Now straighten my images. If I wanted to get rid of these guides, or say I didn't want to get rid of them but I wanted to just hide them, I could go to View, down to Show, and I could turn guides off. And that way, if I want the guides back, I can do the reverse. I can go to View, Show, and Guides. If I want to delete the guides, I can clear the guides there. So there we go, I've just cleared them. So now I'm going to use this polygonal selection tool, and I'm going to very carefully just go around the outside of my image. And this is where the shortcut keys are quite good. Control plus, I can zoom in, and I don't need to exit the tool. I'm not going to be that good with it, but I'll it's just to sort of show you. I remember I've got a shadow there, so I wouldn't actually see that. Use a little bit of artistic license on it. Don't know what's kind of happening in here, but I figure it's like that. I've actually got the model in front of the actual product in front of me, so I can sort of see what's happening. Up to there and across here, and finally back to the start. Double click. Okay, so now I inverse this selection again, otherwise I'll delete what's in the middle here. So I go to Select and Inverse. I'll just show you, just zoom out. There you can see the little lines coming around here. Remember, the shortcut key is Control-Shift-I, and that's a good one to know. And there we go, we've cut the model out. Now I'm just going to use this. This is where this is handy. I'm just going to deselect, so I'm going to press Control D. It always pulls out from the corner, so find out where the corners are and then drag across. And now you can use the arrow keys to just shift your selection. And now I press the delete. And for this one, I'm going to do the same sort of thing. Maybe a bit bigger. Oh, like that. Now I'm going to get the rectangular selection tool. I'm going to press the Shift key to add to this selection, and I'll just delete that. I could add to it again with another ellipse the other end, but by the way, if this is already active and then you click another one out, it will make the other one deactive. Okay, that's good. Arrow key that up and delete that out, deselect. Now you see, if I've now cut all this out from underneath. If I fill this with a different colour behind, you can see that there's a cutout where these holes are. I could also cut these out as well, but I don't need to go that far. Okay, fill that back with white. Okay, so that's basically how I cut those models out, and then all I did was I ran lines across, and then I just scaled my models down and put them into the configuration that you saw earlier, which was this. So I just used this to make sure they were right scale, and I used the free transform just to scale things if they'd gone out of size. So that's how I did this. But carrying on with this, let's have a look how we can change other things. Say for instance I wanted to change this cap and make it a different colour. Well, there's a few tools that you can use to do this, and remember that I could select just the green top if I wanted to and make the change, but let me just show you how you can do a global change of the colour. You can come up to image, make sure that you're on the correct layer. I can come up to image and I can go adjustment, and I can come down to hue and saturation. Now the hue will be the colour change, and depending on the colours you'll have access to different colours. Let's see how I'm changing this. So I'm changing the colour right the way through. So I can go into a red, and then I could push saturation to make it even brighter. I'll just cancel that because what you're seeing is down here it's affecting these colours, and I don't want that to happen. So what can I do to do that? Well, pretty easy. I can select it. So I select, and let's make this maybe a kind of bluey colour. Come around here, and there we go, selected. The only problem with this selection is it's a hard selection, meaning that the edges are really hard, and I actually want it softened so that if I've overlapped anywhere slightly, it's going to blend it into that colour that's next to it. Let me just demonstrate it to you and you'll see what I mean. Right, let me just deselect this, and I'll just drag a circle out. Remember, the feather is 0, and let me just do this. So the only part that will be affected is inside of this marquee. So I'll go to adjustments and hue and saturation, and we'll change this. I'll make it quite evident, so I'll make it dark colour. Click OK, and then deselect. So select, deselect, or Control D. Look how hard that selection is. So if I use the history palette again to move back to this, and I deselect, and now I just change my feather to maybe 20. It's quite a big image, so, and now I drag out, and now I do a adjustment. So we've got a feather setting now. So now let's make that a dark blue, and I click OK, and I press Control D to deselect. Now you notice that it's softer, which is what we want to do. So, with that in mind, deselect, I'm going to choose my marquee to my. You might want to do a test with the feather settings as well if you're not familiar with how it's going to how much it's going to feather off. I am familiar with it, so I can have a pretty good estimate that a feather setting of 5 is going to be fine, because I don't want it to be massive. So I set the feather setting at 5, and I've got once. So first of all I select my selection tool. That's important because it will change to what you've had it set before. So I find my selection tool, then I set the feather, and now I will mask this out. I'm still going to mask quite closely to it. And this is sometimes it's very subtle, you might not even see it, but it's there. I probably could have done with adding to this and used the elliptical marquee tool. Might have been a bit better, it would have been a bit sharper. But come across here. Now I'm coming over here because it doesn't matter because there's nothing there, so it'll only select what's in there. So now I'm going to go to my image and I'm going to go to adjustments and I'm going to go to hue and saturation, and now I'm going to just turn this into kind of a cyan-y type colour. If you go this way it will grey it down, so that'll do, and I'll click OK, and now I'll deselect, and right at the edges it will be a blend, a much better blend than if I'd have just done it as a hard edge. And that goes the same for this edge. These edges are really sharp and I just want to feather them down so that if I had a background behind it, it would sort of feather into it. Well, this is where the magic wand will come in handy. The magic wand allows you to select areas. So now I've selected this background, you'll see that it's right around the outside. I can also select like inside, so I'm just clicking, it's just selecting. If I want to add to this, I just press the shift key, and so I'm shift keying. Now I go to select and modify and down to feather. So you don't always need to set it in the selection, you can make the selection and then you can modify the selection. I'm only going to make this very subtle, so 2 pixels is going to be fine, and I'll click OK. Now what I'm going to do, and I'll show you, I'll zoom in and you'll see, look at this edge. I'm now going to hit the delete. It just knocks it back. Now I'm going to deselect and you can see there's a blend. You can't see it that clearly, so let me put a blend behind this, and now you can see it. If I zoom out you can see it blends in much better. Let me do a better blend, that's better. You can see it matches in much better. If I'd have just left it without the feather, it would look like this little unit was cut out like a magazine and just painted and just glued in on top. So using the feather is vitally important. While we're here, let's look at the blend tool. As you see, I did a blend then. Let's go back and show you this tool. Right, I've selected this layer, which is my base layer, but what I'll do is I'll create a new layer. You don't have to, you could do it on the base layer, but I'm just doing it so I can turn it off and on. Now I've clicked the blend tool, which is bucket tool, come over here, gradient tool. Gradient tool is the proper word. What it will do is it will select a gradient from wherever I start and end. So if I click there and drag this line, this is the angle that the gradient will follow. So down to the bottom, and you can see that it's black and it's white, so it goes from black to white, and I release. So it will start from black and it will go to white. Now also, let's just reverse that, Control Z. I could do it the other way, I could do it this way, I could do it that way, and notice that it will spread from wherever I've put this line. So if I do this, it'll be a really tight blend between the black and the white. But if I do this, it will be a nice gradual blend. So a bit crappy just being able to do black to white, so we must be able to do different colours. Well, we can. Just click, double click the gradient tool up here, sorry, and it will throw this box up, and it's got pre-arranged gradients. You can also create your own. If I come down here, I can click the colour and I could set another colour, but I could also sample. So I'm going to sample a little bit out of here, or I can just pick out of here. It's up to me. If you look this end, that's what it's been applying. I'm going to choose that. Then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select a kind of lighter colour. I'm going to select actually that, and I'm going to move it towards the lighter end of the spectrum there, so it's a very subtle. Click OK, and in here this is where it blends, so it will blend more there. Actually I should pick a a colour that you're going to see a bit clearer for this demo. So you can see it will blend it between these two or backwards. But you also might want to put another colour in the middle. So if I click there, it will add a little blend marker where you can blend it back and forwards, or I can select that one and choose another colour, and then I could push this that way. So pretty cool. You can also set the opacity. So down here I can set the opacity of that slider, and you just click the top to set the opacity. If I drag this off, it will disappear. Like if I drag this one off, it will disappear. So let me put one there. I've got one there. If I want that to disappear, I just drag it off. And if I want to save this as a custom, I can save, and I can call it custom. And that's in my gradients folder within my Photoshop folder. I can save that, and it'll always be available. I could load it again in here. And then I click OK. So now I've got my custom gradient there, and now I can just drag this up, and there you go. Now, as well as being able, as at the moment we've done a linear gradient, but we don't have to do a linear. Down here you've got different options. So if I just press Ctrl Z, if I now do this, it will actually do a gradient that is a radial gradient, so I could radiate it out from there. And there's lots of others as well. Just play around with these. This is quite a good one. It does it both ways. And this one as well, which sort of pushes it out in a square. I never really used that. Yeah, it's mainly the linear. This can be quite good if you're doing annotations down there or something. So yeah, so that's the gradient tool, which is pretty cool. I'm going to put it back to this. I'm going to choose one out of there. Something like that. Click OK. Oh, I'll put it back to this. That's better. Okay. Right. So that's a gradient tool. We looked at that. Paint bucket gradient tool. All very cool. And now we've got our product, and we changed the colour. So let's have a look at the actual adjusting the levels. Now, level adjustments are if you've taken a photograph and some areas are too dark, or overall it's maybe a bit too light or something, you might want to use levels to just adjust it or to check. And it's something that you should do on every photograph, because all of them need a slight bit of adjusting. And Photoshop sort of maps the shadows and the highlights, and it does it in a sort of graph format, like a histogram. So let's have a look at that. If we go to Image and we go to Adjustments and we go to Levels, here's our levels. As you can see, what we need to do is, this is fine, the dark, but the light is too light, or the dark is too dark, so I need to bring this. A general rule of thumb is wherever you see the histogram going up and down, where the dark bit trails off, it might be the other way round, whatever, you need to bring these down to these points. That will give you a correct mapping. So it might be a case that this is flat here and then it goes up and then it comes down sharply here, and these end points might be right at the end, so drag them so that it's actually on the image. And as you can see, you can now see this clearly down here, but it's burning out the top. So I'd click OK. Then I'd probably use a feather here of say 10. Come across here to select. I'm going to make a duplicate. I'm going to duplicate the layer just in case I've got to do any fading. You'll see why in a minute. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to do my levels, and this time I'm going to push this back. Just a little bit. Click OK. Now I'm going to Control D to deselect, and it's just affected there. Now the reason that I did this as a duplicate layer was that if here had been too much and it had burnt it up too much, I could always use the eraser with a standard basic brush, and I could, and I'm using the bracket keys now, and I could just erase this out, and you'll notice that if I now turn this bottom layer off, oh, let's turn this up, right up, like this. Now if I turn this in, there'll be a blend between this and this. And now if I'm happy with that, which I am, like that, I will now just merge this layer onto this layer. So I will go to there, come down to merge down, and there we go. We've lit the bottom up, pulled the detail back out without adjusting any of the top part, which was fine. Looking at my model, I can actually see that I need to push this in a bit more. So I'm just going to zoom in here. Oh, I got feather turned on. Need to turn that off. Actually, I'll set it at 2, which is what I had it before. Deselect. That will sometimes happen. And now I'll just delete. Right, that's correct. And I might need to just nobble a little bit of that off. Maybe a touch there as well. Okay, that's good. Right, so there he is there. So we've looked at the levels there, we've looked at the hue and saturation. We've also got in here, while I'm here, let's just have a look. We've got adjustments, we've got brightness and contrast. Well, it's pretty obvious, brightness or contrast. And make it a bit more contrasty, you can bring this up. So cancel that. Curves as well. Curves are very good. If you've got different colours, we can come in and adjust these. We'll look at these later. Might look a bit baffling, but we'll actually look at these later. And you can sort of change things. It's like the levels, but a lot more control in this. But we'll be tackling that. That deserves its own little bit of time. Exposure. It's like the exposure on a camera. You can exposure, or you can gamma correct it as well. That's quite a handy one to use if you've got a gamma correct to a certain gamma level. Play around with these. Vibrance, hue and saturation we looked at. Colour balance, black and white, photo filter, channel mixer, when it refers to the channel mixer, it refers to the colours that make up this. On the screen we've got this set at RGB. Here you can see it says RGB. It's also an 8-bit image. We'll get more into that later. But RGB means that there's 3 channels. If we come over here to the channel box, you can see there's a red, a green and a blue. If I turn everything off but the blue, that's the blue channel. It's not blue, but it's the channel that makes up the blue. That's the green, and you'll notice that they're black. They're grayscale, and it converts the grayscale to an RGB. This is just the levels of them, and this is a good way to select things as well, but we'll be looking at that later. If I turn all the channels back on and the RGB at the top, you'll see that it will work. It will show the whole thing. So that's the that's in there. So where am I going? Yes, yeah, channel mixer, which you can throw up here. So have a play around with those. They're all things that you'll use on a daily basis. Some of them you won't use at all. Desaturate just takes all the colour information out. You could also go to mode grayscale, which would also take all the colour out, and it's quite handy to do this if you want to turn it into a grayscale, into a duotone or something. Then generally this is the way about it. Now you'll notice that these are kind of greyed out, and that's because they don't work in colour modes. So the only way that you'll get them to work is to actually go into a grayscale mode. Not a quick demo. I'll put this into grayscale, which will lose my colour information. It will say changing mode can affect the appearance of layers, merge layers before mode change. So you don't have to merge, but you can get problems if you don't. So I'll merge and I'll discard, and it's turned it to a black and white image now. But I now have the ability to be able to go into my duotone, which is now available to me. So if I hit the duotone gives you this kind of, like you've probably seen, like this cowboy looking sepia toned prints. So to do like a simple sepia tone, I'd turn it into a duotone. I'd click this, I'd grab a brownie colour, maybe something like this. I'd probably pump the curves up. You can actually do tritone, so it gives you 3, which is generally what I do to put a bit of yellow in there. And so instantly you got this sort of cowboy look. It doesn't look very good on this print, but if I did it on a photograph it would. So that's how you do that. So I'm just going to use my history palette to go back to what I was before. Okay, so we've looked at the adjustment layers, all this stuff. Play around with this. Posterize is quite good. Tells you the levels and you can actually visually see it on screen. Gives you this kind of poster look. See, it's sort of broken it away. Cancel that. That's used for kind of special effects. Mode changes, as we just did. We did a grayscale mode change. Mode change is what you're in. If you're putting anything on the web or on a monitor, you know, for film work and stuff, everything's done in RGB. But if you're doing it for print, everything's done in CMYK. Now you can convert between the RGB to the CMYK, as you can just convert to an index color or a grayscale, lab color, or multi-channel. We'll get into these more. This gives you the bit ratio. Higher quality, higher bits is all you need to know. Most of the time you're working on 8-bit. If you go to 16-bit, it will make the file size considerably bigger, but you'll have higher quality. But you'll do that at the beginning, especially if you're retouching photographs or doing matte paintings, any of that sort of stuff. Good idea to work in 16-bit because of the higher quality and the range of colours and stuff that you can get across, and then you'll output the end to 8-bit and retain lots of that quality. So that's what we got there. We had a look, I think we had a look at the image size. This gave us the image size and the resolution, the height and width of the document. We had a look, I don't know if we had a look at the canvas size. The canvas size just allows you to spread the size of the canvas. Let's have a quick look now. It doesn't actually affect the image, although it does if you reduce it too much. But let me just show you. If I wanted to extend, if I wanted to turn this into a square, and I wanted it to radiate out equally on all sides, I would leave this in the middle. If I wanted it, the spread of the document, the canvas, to go from the top left, I would put the box there. So I'll do it equally in the middle, or you can pick anywhere, so it's up to you. And that's where it'll spread from. If I go to pixel sizes, and I just copy this, Control C, I copy it into the height. Watch this screen. I click OK, and it spread it out. So now it's a square. Of course, because we've spread it out, we've got no background. So I need to come back to my layers, and I could do two things here. I could reapply my gradient, which I've already got here. So I could just do this, or this, or I could do the lazy man, and I could do the free transform, like that. Right, so we don't need all this canvas space, it's massive. So what I'm going to use is my crop tool. I'm just going to crop down here. Okay, so that's the canvas there. And now let's have a look at some layer effects. Right, we've got our layer selected. I'm going to come to layer. I'm going to come down to layer style, and I'm going to click drop shadow. Now move this out of the way. If we look here and I start adjusting these, you'll see it's put a drop shadow behind it. If I adjust this, it adjusts the angle in which the drop shadow pushes out. So imagine this is light, this corner, and this is your object. This is the angle it's pushing out at. Let's put it there. Now if I do size, it blurs it, and spread will spread it out until it hits it. So I want to keep the spread quite low. I want to kind of blur it out, and then this is opacity here, which I can knock back. You notice it lifts it now off of the canvas. Now these are great. These are great. These layer effects. You can do loads of different things with them. This adds like a bevel on it, which looks quite nice. You can put an outer glow on it, inner shadow. So these are great. These effects are fabulous. Color overlay, if you want to knock the color out. So I click OK to that, and you'll see that it will appear down here in the layers. So if I need to get back to it to make further adjustments or add more, I can double click here and it'll pop this back open so I can adjust it further. Now do be careful, because if you resize your canvas, that drop shadow will still remain at those same settings. Let me demo it to you. So I go image size, and I'm going to reduce this down to, like, let's make sure constrain proportions on. I'll do this down to 400 and click OK. Watch the drop shadow. Oh, it seems to be alright actually. Some of them it keeps it, and it'll overdo it, so it'll just look massive. So in order to stop that, what I generally do, if I'm happy with the way this is, I will create a duplicate layer like so. I'll turn this one off. Now I'm going to, and this is where the fill comes in, take the fill, reduce it down to 0. And it's not the opacity, it's the fill, so any effects you've applied still remain, which is pretty good. So now I could now bring this one back up. I could turn this layer effect off, okay, and I would still have my drop shadow, so I could put this underneath. Now the thing is that he has got a fill. Say I wanted to get rid of him altogether, this fill, so that I just had this. Well, what I would need to do is create a new layer. Remember, he's underneath this layer. Come down to this and I'd merge him down. This way it will get rid of the layer effect, but it will keep the layer effect, if you see what I mean. Let me just demo it to you. Let's just merge down. Now I've still got this. I've got no fill, no opacity. Look, it's 100%, 100%. So all it's given me now is this layer effect. In other words, I've got rid of the effect. But I've still kept the effect. So that's a handy thing to know, especially when you start to, if I now resize this image, this effect will stay in proportion exactly. You definitely will get it where you use layer effects and you reduce the size of your image, and then that layer effect will be over bloated, or you'll blow the image up or something and it will look too thin. So you need to bear that in mind. So that's why I've pointed it out. It didn't work when I just did it, but trust me, that's what happens. And so that's a workaround for that if that does happen. Or you can just go back in the settings and just readjust them, which gives you more control. Okay, so that's layer effects. I suggest that you play around with that. It's really cool. And now let's go and have a look at our filters. So filters are great. They give you ways of changing things really quickly. If we go to blur and I go to motion blur, you'll see it's given me a kind of motion blur and a distance. And I can also take this and say what angle it's given me. See that? It looks a bit funny on here because I got that drop shadow turned on. So let's just do a couple of things here. Let's merge this down. Let's just duplicate this layer. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm just going to turn these off. And now I'm going to go to filter, blur, motion blur. I'm going to put this at an angle of 0. And click OK. Now let's bring these up, take this motion blur, use the move tool, and I'm just going to move him to the left. And I'm also going to take this opacity down a little bit. I'm going to move him above the shaded layer. Like that. So there we go. What we've got here now is a kind of effect being added that gives it kind of a look that it's flying across. So if I moved it up here, we can have even more of a look. So I'm going to grab this layer and I'm going to shift select this layer, so the shadow layer and the object. I'm going to use the move tool and I'm just going to move it this way. So you can see you can kind of move it out. Now I'm going to come back to this top layer. I'm going to use the eraser and I'm just going to erase this so you can still see our object, but we've still got our lines kind of spinning over the top. I'll come back down to, I've got that. Then I'm going to use the free transform. That just needed correcting there. Click that. Eraser again. There we go. So there you go. You've got an automatic kind of blurred effect by using the filters. And filters are great. So play around with the filters. I don't particularly like that effect, but just to show you, let me show you how to delete it. If I've got a layer there and I want to delete this layer, there's the bucket, the bin down there, just delete it. Okay, so play around with these filters, they are fantastic. We can add noise to this. uniform, Gaussian, just add a little bit of noise to it, cancel it. These filters are all about that. Stylize, you can emboss, trace, render. Lens flare was used quite a lot. People tend not to use it now, but it sometimes can be quite good. If used correctly. And then you've got a little lens flare that doesn't, because there's no image there, it sort of finishes. So this effect is better at the end when you've merged all the layers together. Right, so this is a big section, so I would now go along and just play with these. Liquify is quite good as well. This allows you to manually, let me cancel that, need to be on the layer that you want to liquify. Liquify. I've used this in some of my tutorials in ZBrush where I'm concepting, but you can actually pull bits out and play around, and it's like a liquid. And you can come over here and change these density sizes and things. Of course you can still use the brackets to adjust your size, so it's quite good for retouching work if you've got to move certain areas. I click OK and it will make those changes, and if I want to go back I'll just use the history. So there's a lot we've covered there, and I'd spend a few hours just playing around with the techniques and things that I've used there about cutting things out, using feathers, adjusting levels, putting layer effects in, applying text, using the clone tools, the tons of things I've covered there. And then we'll move on a bit more to selecting, cutting things out, using masking, using advanced selection techniques, and we'll also cover more of the tools as we go along as well. Plus I want to tell you about outputting formats, and I'll start that off in the next lesson by telling you about different outputs in formats, carrying alphas, JPEGs, PNGs, TIFF files, the generic PSD file, those sort of things. So we'll cover all that in the next lesson. Okay, welcome back. Like I said before, I want to cover image formats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder and just call it formats. Okay, on my desktop. Right, so we've got this image, so we can output this in a variety of formats. This is the actual pixels of the image. So this is the size it will be, and we can, as we know, we can look at the size of the image by going down to image size. Will tell us everything we need to know. This is the document size. This is a resolution. So I told you this is related to if you're going to be print or screen. If you're going to be screen use, 72 is fine. I think Mac monitors are 96, but 72 is the norm. This gives us dimensions in centimeters or millimeters, etc. And more importantly, here's the pixel width and height. How many dots, how many little dots on the screen. So like I said before, a pixel is made up of these little dots. Okay, so if we want to output this, really easy. One, we already know we saved this document, and we saved it. If I make a change, then I'll be able to save it. So I haven't made any changes yet, so let's just undo that, and then I can go to File and I can save, or I can create a new layer. Okay, then I'll be able to save the document, and as you know, I've saved the document as a PSD file. I'll just save as so you can see. Go to my desktop. So save as is saving a copy. Going to formats, and you'll see the format there. That's the name of the file. We can name that whatever we like. This is Basic Training 2, so that's why it's called that. It's also a PSD file, which is a Photoshop file. So if I save that out, it will be this Photoshop file. So I'll just close all this down. Notice all the layers and everything here. If I go into my formats now, you can see it's here. So I can double click this and it will keep it the same. So this is my base file that I keep. But if I'm saving for in a particular format, I might want to output this, so I go save as. You can also go save for web, which will bring up this and allow you to save it in a web format. So lots of the settings are the same. You save it as a JPEG, a PNG 8-bit file, PNG 24, Windows bitmap, or a GIF. I'll get into these later, but I'll just cancel this for now, and we'll just use the normal way of saving. So if I want to save this as, I would save as there, and I would come down and select my format. Obviously you've got a lot more choices in the save as, because a lot of these are not for web. So the save for web is for basically for monitors and for websites and things like that. So this is where you've got most of the options. So let's save it as a JPEG. There's a extended version of the JPEG file, which is JPEG 2000. I don't use that. I use the JPEG most of the time. So let's save it as a JPEG. Watch this extension at the end. JPEG. Okay, depending on what you've got, depends if these options are available. So we'll save it as a JPEG, and I'll just hit the save button. Now it'll ask me the quality. Now because JPEG is a compression format, you can actually reduce the size of the document, but if you reduce it too much it will be pixelated. Now I'll show you the extremes, but obviously if you compress it more, the file size will go down. So if we look here, this file at this size will be 278K. Yeah. Now 1024K equals 1 megabyte, and 1024 megabytes will equal 1 gigabyte, and the same conversion again for terabyte, etc., etc. So if I was saving it, you can see it tells you high quality, maximum quality. You can see here medium quality, low quality, but look at the file size, goes down dramatically. So if you maybe you're saving this for the web, you might want it to be on a medium format to keep it lower quality so that it loads quicker on in a website according to someone's broadband or access speed on the net. So how quick things show the speed of the internet connection. So let's take this to extreme, and I'll put it down to low. Now look at the monitor. You can see I've put it down to low, and this graduation we've got here, you can see lines in it, and that's because the quality's low. If I bring it up, those lines disappear. So with this, it's kind of quality over file size. If I put it highest, you'll lose no quality, but the file will be massive. I tend to put this on about 10. So that's all to do with the quality of the image, and really the size that you need the image as well, the file size that you need the image. So I'll click OK, and now if I close this, you'll see that JPEG has appeared in here. It will keep exactly the same sizes as you've got from the Photoshop file. Obviously if I reduce the image size down in Photoshop and then I saved it out, it would be smaller or bigger, depends on what I did. So let's go and have a look at some other formats. So I'll save this as, and we'll come down. I'm not going to go through all of these. Photoshop, loads of different bitmap. Is a kind of black and white kind of image. Let's just save that out as a bitmap, and you'll see it will give me different options. 24-bit is a good format, 16 will be lower quality, 32 will be higher, bigger file size. It's a Windows format. I'm going to save it like that, and we'll have a look. There's our bitmap of that. Let's now save as, come down. CompuServe GIF files are indexed. Now when I say indexed, I mean what it does is it gives you a certain amount of colours. This is all file size, but with bitmaps it'll also save an alpha channel, so a clear channel. If you look in here at the moment, I've got no alpha channels, but actually in the layers, if I turn these two off, this is an alpha, all this white. So if I save it as a GIF, save as, it might not give me the option in here, but I'll try it. I will save there, and it will give me a number of colours. Now the maximum number of colours for a GIF file is 256, so obviously if you've got millions of colours in here, it's going to really reduce the quality. And you can already see it's dropped it onto one layer, and some funny things have gone on. If I turn transparency off, it will put the white background behind it, but because we've only got 256 colours, it should be a gradient, but it hasn't got enough colours, so it's saying, right, I'll put all the colours into the actual model, and where this was nicely blended off as a soft shadow vignette, it's hardened it all up. So be careful with this. You can select different colour ranges here, web colours if you're shooting for web. If I'm saving as a GIF file, I tend to do it from the save as web. But watch this, if I change these colours down to say 16, it'll only drop it to 217. Actually from the web you can do that, but look, 217, it started to cut the amount of colours down in here, which is not good. You can choose different matte options. Matte options is what it's going to cut. So it's trying to give us a bit more range there. So I'll go back up to 256, and it's a bit crisper. You can set the diver to be as a noise, and that will give it a bit of a softer. But if I was saving as a GIF, I probably wouldn't save a shadow under it, or I'd save it on a background. So let's save, I could save this out like this, I will. There's another part, you can pick the palette that you want to use. I'll save this out, and we'll go normal. Then we'll come into this and have a look at the GIF. There you go. But if I open this up, let's open it. This will open, oh, it's opening in Fireworks. But you can see, opened in Fireworks, but I've got the clear background, which means that if I wanted to overlay this on top of a coloured background, it would be quite good for doing that. But what happens nowadays is most people use like a PNG format. So let's just do that again, but let's use a save for web device and come over here, and we'll choose GIF. And we'll reduce it down. This gives us a lot more control. You can also see the colours that it's picking. So it's picking 256 colours. Let's move this down to 16. So it gives us a choice in here to knock things right down. Put it to 4. You might want this as an effect, so they're good, but remember with GIFs you can save an alpha if you want to, or you don't have to. So I could save this out. Let's just save this and call this version 2, otherwise it will write over the top. Okay. Okay, so let's look at that. So there's our normal GIF there, and there's our basic 2 version GIF. You can see the quality is just so much better. Let me open that up, and there we go. But it has put this white, solid white, so if you put it on a red background, you get this horrible white going around under there, which you wouldn't want. So how can we save an alpha but also keep the quality? Oh, we can do that. What we can do is we can save it as a PNG file. So let's open it as, let's save it as a PNG. Again, save as, come down here to PNG format, click the save button and click OK, and let's have a look. There's our PNG. Doesn't look any different from the basic one that we've got. Obviously I haven't got, the problem with the JPEGs is you cannot carry an alpha channel, so a clear channel for for clearing. With PNGs you can, but I'll still keep the quality. So if I open this up, let's just make sure it opens in Photoshop. Here it is here. And as you can see, if I created a new layer, drop that below it and use the fill brush and just maybe grab a red, drop that in there, there you go. So we've got our image, beautiful image with the soft shadow, no big white thing going there. If I just open up, I'll just open this GIF up because then you'll see, I think it's pretty clear anyway that you can see it, but let's open this up. Open with, another thing you can do, save time, is just drag and drop it. So I can drag it in here. Now that's our GIF file in there, but as you can see, white going around it. So the alpha, it is alpha, it has got white, but it's not as clear because it's only got 256 colours, so it can't cut into the shadows. Whereas a PNG file has got, you can do it at 24-bit, so it'll carry millions of colours. Let me just close this, and we'll use the PNG again, but we'll use it for the web. Now, like JPEGs, PNGs, GIF files, I always use Save for Web. Sometimes I can't because Save for Web only goes to a certain size because it's meant for websites. So a massive image, it will say, do you want to do it? It's not compatible with web or whatever. It'll still do it, but it'll throw up a warning. So if you get that warning, it probably means that your image is massive. So be careful. So let's save for web here. We've got our alpha there because we're in GIF mode, but if I change this to PNG 24-bit, now it's lovely and clear, and you got the quality down there, the percentage down there. So when we save this out, I'll do web and save, and now you can see that I've got a web version in there as well. So there's no difference between these two files really. If you want to do save as or save for web, I always use save for web because it's just gives you, you can see more options and you get a visual feedback. There is actually an 8-bit version as well. So we go in here and we just, 8-bit is less quality. As you can see, it's almost like saving it as a GIF. There's less colours. It kind of indexes it at 8-bit instead of 24. So that's that. Right, so other formats, we do save as, and we've got down here JPEG, PCE, PDF. You can save it as a PDF file, and that's an Acrobat Reader file, a raw Photoshop file, I don't use these, PXR, PNG we've seen, and down the bottom we've got TIFF. So we can save this as a TIFF. This shows you compression, so you can put compression on the model, on the LZW compression, so we can compress this file, or we can do no compression. I'll just do no compression, just do save. It'll ask you if you want to include the layers, so just cancel that. Let me just cancel it all because I don't want to save the layers. Come back down to TIFF, and we've got layers checkbox here. I'm going to turn that off and just do save. Okay, let's close it. Let's have a look. and we should have a TIFF file. There, and let's open that with Photoshop. As you can see, there's our TIFF, but it saved the white background. So how do we get this to save an alpha? Because TIFF does actually save alphas. Well, what we need to do is create an alpha channel for it. So we need to create an alpha channel for it, for the TIFF file to work. So what we're going to do is I'll just show you a kind of alpha channel. If we go into channels, I can go to new channel, and it will come up alpha. I'll just cancel that a minute, and I'll just select part of this image, just the middle. Okay, I'm going to go to new channel, and I'm going to say selected area and click OK. I'm going to drop a black in there, and you'll see there's a little line gone through it, a kind of red tint. That's where my alpha is going to apply. I can turn it off in this layer in the channels. Yeah, so to get to the channels, if I haven't got it open, go to Windows, go down to channels. Okay, so let's go back into our layers, and you'll notice I can deselect this, Control D, and nothing's really happened. But when I go save as, and I pick my TIFF option, I've now got this alpha channel available. So if I uncheck the layers, and we'll save this as basic 2 to overwrite this one, I'll click save, yes, and compression none, Now let's have a look at the image. Right, so what's happened is where I selected that red, it's cut it out. Now let's just have a look at that so you can see. So it's kept all the image, and it's cut this middle section out. So let's just open this up. Okay, so I'm opening this up in Illustrator, and you'll see that nothing much has happened. Which is kind of odd. Right, hold on a sec. Right, yes, so yeah, creating a TIFF alpha. So what we want to do is, like I showed you before, that red showed a cutout. It wasn't shown when I brought it in here, kind of flattened it down. But if I want to create an alpha as a TIFF, I need to add an alpha channel. And so in that channel I need to have this object. So what I tend to do is, if I'm creating the alpha for this object and I want this drop shadow and stuff, to be honest with you, I'd probably output it as a Photoshop file or a TGA file or a Targa file. It's a lot easier, or a PNG file. You don't have to worry about these steps. But let's just have a look and do it here. What we need to do is create an alpha channel. So I need to go into my channels box, new channel, and alpha 1. Don't worry about these selected or masked areas. So now we've got an alpha channel in there. Now we need to get this object in there. Now alpha channels work in black and white, and black will not be visible but white will show through. So what we need to do is layers. We need to get this layer. In fact, I've gone on the wrong one. I should have gone straight on to my Photoshop file, so sorry, I'll do this again and you can see what I'm going to do. Let's just delete this so we can start again. Okay, so here's our object. We've still got our gradient backgrounds, which we don't actually need because we're alphaing, so I'm just going to delete these out. I've got one layer, and my channels are my normal channels for RGB. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to just click OK. layers there, the channels there, sorry, not a layer. What I need to do is to make this black and white. So easy way of doing that is to duplicate this layer. So I'll duplicate, and I'll keep my original there, I'll turn him off. And I'm going to come up to my layers, and I'm going to go down to layer style, and I'm going to go down to color overlay. And you notice automatically it's dropped this color in there. So what I need to do is select a black. I'm going to go down here and just type all zeros, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and click OK. Then I'm going to click OK. And so now we've got that as black. So I want to flatten this layer. So I'm going to create a new layer above this layer. Yeah. And I'm just going to merge down, which is Control E on your keyboard. Or we can come over here and merge down there. Now I need to put a, let me go back a step here. Sorry about this. I should have just put white in here. I needed to drop white. So I've got white selected here. Just drop it in. And now I'll merge down. So the same way as before here. Merge down, Control E. Now what I want to do is I want to reverse this out, because remember, black will mask and white will show through. So I'm going to go up to Image and Adjustments, and I'm going to go to Invert, like that. Okay. Now I'm going to press Control X to cut this. I'm going to come into my channel. I'm going to click down here. I'm going to turn these off, and I'm simply going to paste. Now I'm going to turn these back on again. Come back into my layers. Delete this blank layer, turn him on, and so you don't notice anything, but we've got a channel in here that's going to work with this. So now you can turn that channel off, you don't need it on. Now I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to save as, and I'm going to come down to my TIFF, and I'm going to save this out, and I'm going to replace it, and image compression, no. Including layers, cancel this, cancel. Let's go back, File, Save As, TIFF file, make sure that alpha is checked, turn off the layers, and we'll save this, replace that, and click OK. Right, so now, in here, our TIFF looks normal, but it's actually alphaed. Now if I take this into something like Adobe After Effects, you'll be able to see. Let's go File, Import, Basic TIFF. Now it gives you the alpha sections in here. I want straight unmatted. I'll just click OK. Now I'm going to drag this down into my timeline and put this as fit. It's on a grey background, but you can see it's got the shadow. So if I created a new layer, say a red layer, and then I drag this down below it, there we go. So we've got our shadow in there and our object, and it's carrying the alpha. So that's TIFF files, but they can, there's it can be an extra lot of work by creating alpha masks and things. Which is a bit of a pain. So if I don't want to do that, what I can do is save as a PNG file, which carries the alpha, or I can also save as a TGA file, which is down here, a Targa file, and we'll save this out as there. You can set the resolution, leave it at 24-bit, and now I've got a TGA file there, which also carries an alpha channel. Some funny things are going on. Shouldn't be doing this. But the TGA carries the alpha file. Let's try Illustrator. probably not going to work. No, it is carrying an alpha though. Right, let's try the famous After Effects. If it allows me, it should allow me to take a Targa in. Yeah. Right, the Targa should actually be holding the alpha. Don't know why it isn't. Sometimes these things happen. Yeah, so the TIFF file, actually you need to create an alpha channel the same way as we did with the TIFF. I don't tend to use TIFFs and alpha and Targa files that much. I use output as PNG, or I import PSD files, Photoshop files, and you don't have to worry about all this rubbish. It just adds time to the job. But if you need to create one, you need to go about it the same way as this. So it needs to have an alpha channel in TIFF and Targa files for it to be for you to have like clear or transparency added to it. But if you output as a PSD file or as a PNG file, you don't need to worry about any of that. And even a GIF will carry it as well. So even a GIF 256 colours, you are limited with that. So I'd stick with the Photoshop format or the PNG format for outputting, or if it's a solid thing, I just do it as a JPEG. So there we go. So that's to do with that stuff all done. So let's have a look. Any more formats you really need to know about? No, we've done the rest. So that's kind of good. Yep, so that's it. That's formatting. We've spent quite a bit of time on this, but it is important to know your formats. And if you want to find out any more information on any of these formats, then just Google it, and it will tell you loads of stuff about all the different formats and their options. Okay, so let's carry on now. Right, what we want to do is to look at more of the tools and to look at more of the masking techniques. So we're going to leave this image now, and we're going to open up a new image and start playing around with different features within Photoshop. Okay, I want to show you an image that I've done down here, and this was basically it was rendered out of a 3D program, and then I put it together in Photoshop. But it's quite good for me to show you kind of the steps that were involved. So let's do that. Right, the first thing I did was to create this kind of speckledy background. And I did that just, as you can see, using a bit of noise and using some layers. So let's just sort of like recreate something similar. I create a new layer now, and I'll just, let me just delete all these layers, and we can take it a stage further. Just make sure I've got all the files that I need. Let's delete these. Okay, let's take this background out. So all I'm left with is the files that I outputted from ZBrush, and I'll get rid of the group because I'll show you how to do that later. Okay, so I've got all my images, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. This is going to be for the background. Yeah, that was my mask. I just need to make a couple of adjustments here. I'm just going to delete some of these files that I've got that weren't outputted, so that I can take you through each of the steps. Okay, that's good. It's the same, I just doubled up. Right, okay. So my outputs, just to show you, this was kind of a flattish colour output from ZBrush. This was, well, you can't see it clearly because I've got the fill down, was a kind of specular output. This one here was, I think, a secondary shadow. I had a hair one, which was here, and I had this one. Now I've got blending modes on all of these, so I'm going to just check that my blending modes are all off so I can show you exactly how this was done. Okay, they're all off, and also, just to make life a bit harder, I'm going to just, now the only reason I'm doing this is just to show you how I separate this person. Let me turn this up. This person from all this background, and that's why I'm doing a splattery old mess, so you can see that I can separate it out. Let's put this. Okay, that's good. Let's do a new layer. I've only got to show you once because then you'll see how I've done it. And I'll just fill this with red, and then I'll just merge this down, Control E. Now I'm going to take this layer, which is nicely separated out, and I'm going to drop it onto this messy layer, Control E. Right. So what if I want to cut this guy out? I mean, it would be a nightmare to go through and cut all these hair fibers out. So when I outputted a mask, which is this. So to separate him from the background, what I need to do is I'm going to use a layer mask. Now there's two ways of doing this. You can use a layer mask or you can use selection. So if I pick this mask layer here and I use the magic tool, I can do this and it will select a colour range based on a tolerance. So if I boost this tolerance to 64 and now I use it, it extends out. I can go to select and then I can go similar and it will pull it out even more. So it's a good way of selecting using the magic wand. Unfortunately, if we look in closely, some of these ends have not been selected. So I probably would have to go to select and similar again, or grow selection, to try and capture some of these. So there must be a better way. I mean, it's a black and white mask. There must be a better way of actually trying to mask without using this selection. Let me show you using the selection what we'll get. If I come back down to here, I want to inverse his selection, otherwise it will cut his head out. So I press Control Shift I, or I go select inverse down here, and then I just hit the backspace. Now it's good, but if I deselect, you can see it's still captured a bit of that colour that was there, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go back using my history palette like this, and I'm going to deselect, Control D. So how can I use this black and white as a mask to cut this out? Well, what we can do is we can click the layer, we can go down to layer, and we can go layer mask, reveal all. This will open another little tag here. And we're going to open up this, and we're going to press Control A to select all, or go select all. Then we're going to press Control C to copy it, and we can turn this layer off. Now down here we're going to press the Alt over this white box, and now we're going to press Control V to paste it in there, or up here, paste. Now we're going to press Alt on this layer, and as you can see, it's done a much better job of cutting out. There's still a little bit there, but a much better job. So if I go back into this, you can see I could actually use a brush here. Now you've got to remember, I outputted this on a white background, so it's nice and clean. That's why it's giving me these funny looks. But I'm going to change the opacity down to about 57 and just wipe over here. Now I'm going to press the Alt key and we're breaking it down. So if I want to actually view this while I'm cutting through it, I can just press, select this, yeah, don't press Alt, just select it. Make sure that you've got black, and we can start to add to the mask. And as you can see, I can cut in. Now if you do it too much, you can select a white and you can add it back in. Do you notice? See, I'm adding the background back in at 57%. If I go back over it, so it's a very non-destructive way of cutting him out, which is pretty cool. So that's how to use layer masking. When you're finished and you're happy with the cutout, so I'll put it back into black again and just put this up to 100% and just cut it out like that. You can also use the selection tools, so I can just Control D. If I want to put this pipe back in, I can do this, and then I can just use the black again. Oh, sorry, use the white in this case. Yeah, and remember that it's selected there, so when you've finished, then click back here. So if I'm happy with that, I want to get rid of this layer mask. What I can do is apply layer mask and job done. If I create a new layer, say with a white, something like this, and then I use the fill paint bucket and drag this below, you can see I've sliced it out. It's still got colour in there, but it was just a demo to show you how you can use layer masking to mask out non-destructively. And that's really important, that you're non-destructive with the way that you're trying to do these things. So I've gone back as far as I can go with my my history, so I'm going to have to take it back to the original. Okay, I'm back to my original now. So like I said to you before, this original, when I outputted this, the background was a white, so it's cut out very nicely using that masking technique that we just looked at. Okay, so that's enough for this lesson. That's a few little tips and tricks. So in the next lesson I'll show you how I kind of made this character using all different blending modes and different techniques. Okay, continuing with this course, I'm now going to show you how I sort of put this picture together. I'll just open up the original for you. I did two versions here. I did a close-up and I did this one. So here we go. This is what we're trying to achieve. So quite a bit of difference between this and this, but by using different layers and different layer blending modes, we can create something that's similar to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is create this kind of background. So what I'm going to do is create a new layer, and I'm going to turn off this. Actually, I'll leave it on for composition. Now I'm going to use the rectangular tool with no feather turned on, and I'm just going to drag out a rectangle like this. Inside that rectangle I'm going to put a gradient. It's up to you what colours you're going to use. I might stick with, this is a bit kind of pinky, so I want to go more towards the white. Again, you can just pick the colour picker up there if you wanted to. In fact, that'd be quicker. Okay, now I've got that, I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to drag from the top to the bottom. So let's put that in, that's quite nice. Right, now I'm going to just create a new layer, and this layer is going to be slightly darker because I want these to be kind of panels, white kind of card panels. So I'm going to use my bucket tool. I'm going to pick a darker grey and just drop it in there, and look, that's quite nice. So now I'm going to go into my blending modes, my layer effects. I'm going to go to layer style, I'm going to go to drop shadow, and I'm going to put it this way because I want it to come out this side. I'm also going to increase the size a little bit. And I'm going to do a bevel and emboss, the depth of which I'm going to bring up a little bit. So that's quite nice. I'm going to kind of get rid of some of this, bring the opacity down a little bit. That's quite nice there. So play around with those settings, and then I'm going to click OK. Now I want to be able to transform this to get rid of this little bit. So I'm happy with that. So I think what I'll do is a new layer, and then I'll just merge this down onto this blank layer. So go to your options there and merge down. Now I'm going to before I duplicate, I'm going to go to edit, free transform, and that'll allow me to get rid of this by just pulling this across. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to go to edit and free transform, rotate, actually flip horizontally, and that will flip it horizontally. So now if I get my move tool and move it across, you'll see it's flipped. It's a bit big, that space, so I'm going to use my free transform just to fill that space a little bit more. Now I'm going to merge this layer down. I'm going to use the shortcut now, Control E. It's merged down, and this background's a bit too dark, so I'm actually going to use a gradient, but my gradient I'm going to darken a little bit. So I'm going to come to this, and I'm going to pick a lightish grey out of there down to a darkish grey, and then click OK. And now I'm going to drag down. That's good. Okay, so now I want to just reduce the opacity a little bit, or the fill. I'm going to choose the opacity there, and now I'm going to merge this down, Control E. Now I'm going to apply a little bit of noise, a bit too much, more uniform, and click OK. So now we've got pretty much something similar to that. Now I'm going to blur it slightly, I think, so I'm going to use a Gaussian blur, so filters down to Gaussian blur, and just press OK. It just adds a bit of noise in that background. We will be using depth of field, so that will be even more blurred at the end. So okay, that's our panel created. I'll just delete this one, and remember we're trying to get something like this. Right, okay. Right, so what we got is we got our base layer, and then we got this layer, and this is all I've done is some of this area I've used the eraser tool and just gone over it because I wanted more stuff to show through. But the most important thing is the blending mode, and if I go down here to overlay, you can see different blending modes coming through. Lighten, and that's the one I used, was the lighten, because all I wanted to do is basically lighten anything on this layer that is lighter than anything underneath will appear. Anything darker will disappear. So if I put it to normal, all this stuff here is all darker, but these little bits on the nose are lighter, so they show through when I use the lighten filter. So that's what I did for that. Now the next layer I've got is this one, and what I used on this was not a screen, I think was an overlay. Just to add a little bit more brightness to it. Then I had this layer, which I used, I think I used a soft light on it just to cut in around here. Soft light adds this kind of effect, it sort of brightens some areas. And I've got this, and this is purely a multiply, just darker. Multiply basically puts the darker colours over the top, gets rid of the white. So it's good for like things like shadows. I've got an ambient occlusion, which I also put as a multiply pass, and then I've got the hair here, which I think I used the darken mode on. Yeah, I did. And so what I've got is this layer is causing some problems. So these other layers, I'm just going to knock the opacity down on them. Oh, it's actually a multiply on the hair layer, just to knock it back. Yeah, that's got rid of that sort of fringe effect that was happening there. Okay, so that's my layers done. So it's looking fairly like this. I might need to lighten some of this down. So you can see how building up and using these layer blending modes can really change things. So what have I got now? Well, this is my depth of field. This is my mask, which we're not using anymore, but this is my depth of field, and this is what we'll be using. So if we've got these, this is our final renders here, our final bits. What I want to do is I want to add these, all of these in fact, to a group, and then I want to flatten the image and use the depth of field to create the depth of field blur using lens blur. So to put these in a group, we select them all, select here, and then go new group from layers, and I call this something like design, and now you'll see that I can turn them off. And what I want to do is to duplicate these layers now. I don't need the mask. I'm duplicating these layers, so I'm selecting these layers. I've opened this little tab up. I'm selecting these layers by pressing this one, holding the shift, and then selecting the bottom. Then I'm going to go duplicate layers, click OK. Now I want to drag these so that it just goes to the top. You can see it sort of change when I release. Now I've got a duplicate of my layers, and I've got my originals there. And what I want to do is now turn this depth of field pass off, have these layers selected, and go up to layers and go merge visible. Now if you manually merge them, what it tends to do is take on the attribute of what's underneath. So say you've got a multiply layer, and then on top of it you've got a soft filter, soft overlay. When you merge it down using the traditional merge methods, it sort of changes it to like a multiplier on the top, and you get unusual effects. So the best way to flatten an image is to open it all up like I did just then and go to merge visible. Okay, so now what we're going to do is apply this depth of field pass. You can create your own. You could paint in white here and then grey around here and create your own depth of field pass, but I just did this straight from ZBrush. So to do it, we need to use the old masking technique we used last time. So go to Layer, Layer Mask, and Reveal All. I'm now going to select this layer, and I'm going to press Ctrl A to select a marquee around it all, or up to here, select all. Then I'm going to press the Ctrl C to copy. Then I'm going to press the Alt key to come in here, and I'm going to press Ctrl V. Now when you come out, it will look a bit weird, but trust me, this will work. Right, so now we go down to Filter, and we're going to go to Blur, and this time down to Lens Blur. This will throw up this screen, and you can see already that the lens blur has blurred this background, and it's based on wherever you click. So if I click the background, that will remain sharp and the face will get blurred. And this is all to do, make sure that the source is layer mask in here, and you can change these settings. And the radius, you can see by changing the radius it's going to get even more. I can bring this radius right down, bring him out, but I'll say that's pretty good, and then I click OK, and now it will apply this lens blur mask to the layers in the layer in the Photoshop file. But sometimes this can take quite a while, and this is quite a big image, so it's going to take a little bit of time.